Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to our webinar series. My name is Chloe Tetro. I am the health coach here with Ready Care. For today, we're going to be looking at the very important topic of the courage of vulnerability. So on the back of mental health awareness going on this month and the importance of conversation and reaching out, what I thought we could focus on for today is really looking at breaking the stigma around our relationship to vulnerability, why that's important, and the ways that we can begin to practically begin conversations around our mental health. Now, with regards to mental health, we've just come out of the Christmas period, which is lovely. It's a big high. It can sometimes be a big drop back down. So January, very long month for most people, and I think it's rained almost every single day for 5 weeks. So to paint a picture, mental health is something that most individuals struggle with and report struggling with at some point in their life. 1 in 4 report, but that number is of course thought to be an awful lot bigger. So that can include anything from bouts of very low moods that start to become debilitating, anxiety that begins to be debilitating, beginning behaviors such as repetitive behaviors that are new behaviors for you that begin to feel necessary in order to feel safe. So it can look like an awful lot of different things depending on the person, and that's something very vital and crucial to drive for today, is that there is no one way that one's mental health can be affected. It's important to be aware of specific ways it can show up for yourself that might be out of the norm of what you yourself would usually function as. So some of the ways that people can start to notice that something is starting to feel a little bit different for them. What I'll focus on in this part is talking about somebody's threshold of tolerance. And what I mean by that is we all have an ability to tolerate an amount of things thrown at us, right? So I think the word resilience is bandied about quite a bit in workplaces and around. So that's essentially what I'm speaking about here. It's our capacity to take external stressors, internal stressors, changes, things that are unpredictable, and to go with it, right? To be adaptable, to be flexible. So when we have a high degree of resilience, or when we have a high degree of our tolerance, the threshold for our tolerance is quite high, it basically just means that we can take on stressors, right? We're able to do it. Now, sometimes what can happen is our window of tolerance gets a little bit smaller and smaller and smaller, and we don't really notice it. So how it can show itself is increased irritability. That's my one. The everyday tasks that you've quote unquote always been able to do now start to feel extremely overwhelming, right? And this is a big one for most people. Things haven't changed hugely, but your capacity to hold that change is starting to slip a little bit. Now, oftentimes that can be accompanied by really confusing self-talk, because part of you will go, there must be something wrong with me because I was really able to do this, just 3 months ago, 4 months ago. I don't know what's happening. And there's almost a shame and a guilt that goes with that, because in our social circle, in our workplaces, in our families, we've built up a life with a certain degree of expectations from other people on ourselves and to ourselves on ourselves. So we expect to be able to do certain things in a specific way. And our friends and family and co-workers have come to expect a degree of certain behaviors from us done in a certain way, including customer service face, a smile on the face and a good attitude. So when we start to notice that that isn't quite going the way that we're used to things going, and things are a little bit more difficult, what can happen for most people is they will suppress that to others. They repress it in themselves and hide it from other people because there is a degree of shame and guilt that goes along with it, i.e., what's wrong with me that I can't just do what I was able to do before. Now, suppression and repression over time can have an effect that's quite insidious on our psyche, in that we start to separate ourselves into the good version of me and the bad version of me. And anything we don't like gets stuffed into the bad version, and anything that we want to retain our social connections with, we don't want people to start getting cross with us, odd with us, or think that we're weak, or think that, we're a drama queen, or all these different labels that we place on it just for having needs. And that splitting starts to become more and more difficult. So going by your day, feeling a certain way and pretending to feel another is a form of self-abandonment that starts to really, really hurt. Hurt is the word. It starts to hurt us. It starts to make us feel like having the emotions that we have is somewhat wrong, and it's something that we should put away. But of course, anything that we suppress has a tendency to build up. It builds up a little bit of pressure in us. It's like a dam. You're trying to patch a dam, the pressure builds up. So in the day-to-day life, when these things are not addressed, it can begin to take a huge mental tax on our system. It can begin to make everyday activities feel draining. It can begin to make our lives, the people in our lives, draining. They're taking, I have nothing left to give. I'm exhausted on a constant basis. And the joy can begin to go. Now, what I'd like to chat about today is that relationship to vulnerability, because vulnerability can be seen by most, unfortunately, as a weakness, whereas vulnerability in and of itself is an absolute human trait, and it's predicated on uncertainty, right? When we feel a degree of uncertainty, and being emotionally bare, right? When we put the hat on of that being a bad thing, both of those things together sound terrifying. They're things we do not want to do. We do not want to be emotionally bare. We do not want to be carrying this uncertainty around our emotions, and how are we going to be received? Now, there's a fantastic researcher called Brené Brown. If you haven't read or heard of her or watched her, I really, really recommend her. Brené Brown is her name. And she's dedicated most of her career around looking into vulnerability and how courage is actually totally incapable of existing outside of vulnerability. And the reason for that being is, for any honest, positive change, anything honest, anything that feels real is something that's truly going to impact you, right? They're the real things in your life, the real conversations. They all demand a degree of vulnerability. So Gabor Mate, another great researcher, speaks about the power of connection and how isolation and loneliness, connection is the antidote to that, and having those bonding moments, that feel real, because of course we can have conversations all day long. We can be communicating all day long on social media, on Teams apps going constantly on our phones, or having just shallow conversations. But of course, if they are not touching the depth of who you are and what's happening in your life, the isolation becomes incredibly real. And we can see that in an awful lot of people, that particularly young people, that would feel a huge amount of social isolation based on their device use and that constant noise replacing depth. So vulnerable conversations are difficult. They are difficult because of the uncertainty and because of the emotional attachment to it. What I'd like to do is give a little bit of practical ideas of where to start with it. So when when we suffer, I suppose, first of all, when we suffer from loneliness, it's not just a feeling, it's a huge predicator for depression, which is why, there are an awful lot of campaigns to look after the elderly to make sure they don't have bouts of loneliness. And a major study would have estimated there's between 11 and 18% of depression cases would be preventable if loneliness in itself had been eliminated. So the supportive relationships and those types of conversations, they really create a mental, psychological buffer to your stress physiology. So that's your HPA axis, your cortisol response, and they're basically helping the body to stand down from this threat, from this danger. So the important thing that I want to state is, depending on where you feel at, the degree of reaching out needs to be within your window of tolerance, right? You need to honor where you're at. And why I say that is, sometimes choosing the wrong person to have conversations with is not the best option. So I would say start with somebody that you trust hugely, right? Start with somebody that you have examples in your life of them navigating emotional conversations with a degree of grace. And that can be friends, it could be partners, it could be family members. For others, those are not a good pick for you at this point in your life, and that's okay. It can be a close colleague that you have those kind of relations with. It can be a counselor if you decide, look, I actually don't want to speak to anybody right now in my life. I'm not ready for that just yet. Speaking to somebody on the outside, a therapist, a counselor, is a huge way to get yourself more accustomed to microdosing vulnerability in an absolute non-judgmental space. Now, if there's a degree of risk, of course, please reach out to numbers like Samaritans, Aware, and the urgent systems. But what I'd like to prep in practical terms really is, if you have chosen a person to speak to, what might that look like? Now, the first thing I would usually say is, if you're quite nervous about this, it's always a good idea just to mentally rehearse something by just writing it down. So if you want to write down a few points that very honestly you would like to talk about and you're afraid of potentially going off track, practice it, rehearse it a few times, write it, journal it, and even journaling could be a good way for you to practice honesty and vulnerability with yourself. This is for nobody else but yourself. So a 3-step approach, and I'll write it on the screen here, would be prepare, disclose, and follow up. So I'll pop that here: prepare, disclose, follow up. Now, what do I mean by that? So preparing is basically naming what's true. You choose your person. So you have to know what it is that you're naming. So naming it plainly could be things like, right now I'm feeling anxious. Right now I'm feeling low. Right now I'm feeling overwhelmed. So know for yourself what exactly it is that you're trying to say. What is it you're trying to communicate? Next would be to disclose. So once you've chosen your person and what to say, decide a specific boundary for yourself. So you can decide that your boundary will be, I'm not going to stay in a conversation that no longer feels safe. Or you can even have a boundary of, I'm going to keep it to the bare minimum. That's boundary in of itself. So micro little scripts around that could be things like, is now a good time for something a bit personal, right? Because there you're looking for consent. You're making sure that the scene has been set adequately. You're letting a person know. They can give you their consent right back. They can say, right now is not a good time, but you are being quite explicit. You're prepping the other person and giving them the grace of a two-way agreement. And that reduces the pressure on them as well, because when an individual isn't exactly sure what they're getting into. Sometimes they could be in a totally different headspace than what you're looking for. So you want to be asking something like, is now a good time for something a bit personal? And that's great with any relationship, especially if you already have a pre-existing relationship. So friend, family member, partner, somebody that you really trust. So I'm okay to share for a minute. Are you able to listen? That's another good one, because you're basically letting them know this is not going to be a 2-hour conversation. You just have something you'd like to get off your chest. And what that allows is the other person to give you consent on their capacity. So you want to be able to have a conversation when ye are both on the same capacity. Because if you're feeling a bit stressed and a bit exposed, your best partner for that dance is somebody that's able to hold secure psychological space. And secure psychological space usually comes when somebody's in a more relaxed headspace. Now, that's not to say that you should avoid all conversations with all people if they have the slightest thing going on in their life. That's why you ask. Right. Is now a good time for something personal? I'm okay to share for a minute. Are you able to listen? Now, I don't need fixing, just listening for 2 minutes, right? I don't need fixing is an important one, particularly with the Irish psyche, particularly if you're speaking to a parent, because most people's jumping in is they'll see somebody that they love and care about in pain, and with the best of intentions, they will start to throw, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Right? We're all guilty of it. Have you tried going for a walk? Have you tried meditating? Have you tried Tai Chi? Whatever it might be. You're not looking to be rescued. You're looking to be listened to. So, is now a good time for something a bit personal? I'm okay to share for a minute. Are you able to listen? I don't need any fixing. Thank you, my love, my dearest. I just need somebody to listen for 2 minutes. Now, this is where you start to name things. I have been feeling overwhelmed and more overwhelmed than usual, or I've been feeling low and lower than usual, and it's starting to affect me. So you're not oversharing, you're not dumping onto somebody, which is, something that people can be conscious of or afraid of sometimes. You're being very bounded, you're being very honest, and it's succinct. Sometimes the easiest way to have a vulnerable conversation is to limit the amount of words being used. You do not need to explain why you feel these things unless you want to at a later point. The most important part is to communicate this. So I've been feeling more overwhelmed than usual, and it's affecting me. What I'm asking for, this is your follow-up. This is your, between your disclose and your follow-up. It's something that you need, and it's okay to have needs. Relationships are built off exchanges constantly. And sometimes they're inferred and sometimes they are very, very explicit, like now. What I'm asking for is a little bit of support. What I'm asking for is a little bit of understanding. What I'm asking for is a little bit of patience, right? You want to be really sure how you feel, that you've asked consent, that you're communicating clearly, and what you're asking for. Because essentially, most of us need a little bit of something when we are in those particularly challenging headspaces. What I'm asking for is a bit more contact and a bit more checking in. How are you doing? I need a little bit more of that at the moment. Now, that allows the person to have given you full consent along the way, right? If you get to that point and they say, okay, what does that look like? Okay, perfect. That looks like, would you mind just sending me a text every couple of days, just checking it? And they know exactly how they can help you in the exact way that you need to be helped right now, or you need a bit of support. So your preparation, name what's true, choose your person, decide your boundary, and ask. Disclosure is ask permission. Again, we want to be checking for consent each time. Most people are fabulous with that. They will tell you. They will tell you if you give them the chance to do it. Most people want to help. They just aren't too sure how to sometimes. Now you share your 1 or 2 sentences, you make your request, and you agree a next step. So all of those in conjunction, that's the simplest anatomy for that I can share within the time constraint of today. And to be on the lookout, potentially, if this may not be you, but if there are other people in your life sending you those signals, if you're looking to be more supportive on the other side of it, there's a few things that can be done. The biggest one I will reiterate, which is asking versus fixing, listening. You don't, one usually seeks to be seen in all of their rejected, self-rejected things they deem ugly and hard and painful. Just to be recognized helps that split I mentioned to actually come back together, right? That split happens when things are exiled, they're pushed away to the side. By you just acknowledging that the person you love is still the person you love as they have all of those things, and you yourself as somebody who cares for them can sit with that and not look to make it go away quickly by fixing it right now. That's a conversation you might have down the line, but as a way to show up for the person you love, knowing how to ask versus fixing is a huge, huge benefit. A fairly recent trend, which is lovely, I think it started on TikTok or something, like we listen and we don't judge. It's a bit silly, but basically offering reassurance more than usual. Oftentimes we think that if we're in a relationship, be it a friendship, a colleague, a partner, etc., that we've established a relationship so well over the years that certain things, quote, go without saying, and buck against that just a little bit sometimes. And for the sake of, why not? For the sake of preventative care, reassuring somebody that they can speak to you about anything, that you will bring out the shovel if they told you that they killed someone, just various ways to reassure that your relationship is safe, and having check-ins for yourself to do that more often, because we do forget. Now, I'll end up going over time, but I'll just pop up some numbers here in the event that individuals are struggling and they know that they want to reach out, and they know that they want to have conversations, and they know that they want to talk to their friends, families, and loved ones, but they're not quite there yet. Samaritans Ireland, let me just see if I can do that there. I'll pop it up on the screen. They're absolutely fantastic. So Samaritans Ireland, they're here, and we have another one here, Aware. They're brilliant. No, they're all in here. And what I will also do, pop them up on the screen, and what I'll also do is I'm going to give my email address at the end of this, as I usually do, and that's just if there are specific topics you'd like me to cover going forward. I'm more than happy to hear suggestions of things you are interested in. So if you stayed with me the whole 23 minutes, well done you. And I would really recommend checking out Brené Brown. She's brilliant, and the work of Gabor Mate, and all of it's around how to really bridge the gap of isolation and look after one another relationally in a way that feels safe and secure, where your boundaries and your consent is looked after, and where any exiled parts, any bits of you that have felt this is ugly and I don't want anybody to see it, the magic and the absolute beauty in having that specific part being looked at and loved and accepted. So have a lovely rest of your day, guys. And any comments, queries, I always love to receive them. And we will speak to you in 2 weeks' time. Bye now.